Lose weight fast. Money back guaranteed.
Developing tonight, he is from a county that has only 2 stoplights, and he was the first NFL player ever from his hometown. But now ex-NFL and former Michigan State football star Keith Mumphrey is in the fight of his life. This Me Too target says he is innocent. He's just filed a lawsuit against his college. The former Texans wide receiver was cut from the team 2 days after the Detroit Free Press broke this story. He was never charged with any crime. He is here exclusively for the first time on television to tell his side of the story in moments. But first, Trace Gallagher gives us the backstory. Trace.
Martha, both sides agree that on March 17, 2015, the woman in this case invited Keith Mumphrey back to her Michigan State dorm room. And there are text messages and a picture indicating that at the very least, the atmosphere was flirtatious. But the woman claims she was drunk and unable to give consent. Mumphrey says she was not intoxicated, and surveillance video shows at the time she was walking with a, quote, steady gait and had no trouble keeping her balance. Keith Mumphrey claims the woman opposed him using a condom and they did not have sex. The woman claims she was sexually assaulted and filed a claim with campus police the next day. Now remember, Michigan State follows the so-called Dear Colleague guidelines issued during the Obama administration. So instead of using the legal guilt standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, the university threshold is more likely than not. And under the Dear Colleague policy, the accused is not allowed to question the accuser. And yet, despite that, after months of investigating, the university found that Mumphrey did not violate the school's sexual misconduct policy. Even the county prosecutor decided not to file charges, citing a lack of evidence and a lack of cooperation by the accuser. But unlike a court of law where a not guilty verdict cannot be retried, Title IX investigations do allow double jeopardy. So the woman appeals Mumphrey's acquittal and Michigan State reopens the case. But Keith Mumphrey is now playing for the Houston Texans, and the notification by the school is sent to an old email account. So he doesn't know the case is back open and does not offer a defense. And in March of 2017, the university finds him responsible for sexual misconduct. He's then cut by the Texans, cannot get a tryout with any other team, and because he's banned from Michigan State, he can't finish his graduate degree. Mumphrey has now filed a lawsuit against Michigan State, alleging the university has left him with no viable job prospects, among other things. We reached out to MSU for a comment. So far, no response. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Here now, former Michigan State and ex-NFL player Keith Mumphrey and his attorney, Andrew Miltenberg. Keith, thank you for being here tonight. It's good to have you with us. I'm going to ask you the tough question first. Did you sexually assault this woman?
No, ma'am.
What happened that night?
She invited me over to her room. I actually met her through Tinder. She invited me over to her room. She sent me a few pictures. We talked, and she told me she wanted me to come over when her roommates leave. So I came over. Roommates left. It was just me and her there. As soon as I got in there, she started undressing. So she basically made it known, you know, what she wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So fast forward a little bit. We got to a situation, and the situation was about the condom. I told her that I did not have sex without a condom. So that's when she flipped, and everything just went south. So I basically, you know, told her, like, hey, it's time for me to leave. I don't have time for this. I basically said, I'm an athlete, I'm black, and you're white. And I told her that, and I left. And that was the end of that.
So you never had sexual intercourse with this woman?
No, ma'am, I never did.
And
no,
is it true that you say one of your siblings had a baby at a young age, and that's why that's always your policy in terms of birth control?
Yes, I don't have any kids, so I mean, I'm not gonna have any kids till I'm married. So yeah. That was one of the main reasons. So.
All right. So you think that all of this is behind you because the school found you not guilty. The prosecutor dropped the charges after they looked at it and said, you know, there's nothing here. We're not moving forward. So then you go off to begin your life and your dream as a player for the Houston Texans. And suddenly you go back to play in a golf tournament at Michigan State. And suddenly someone comes up to you and says, you need to leave the property right now because she appealed your case and now we've decided you're guilty. What was your reaction?
I was hurt. Like, my feelings were crushed.
And what did you think about your future? Because then the story comes out in the Detroit Free Press, and then what happens when they call you into the office at the Texans?
Basically, they tell me that, article came out, bad press, and we have zero tolerance for this.
So Andrew Miltenberg, does he have a case? Can he turn his life around?
Absolutely. I think the NFL should welcome him back and give him an opportunity. He's been the subject of and victim of a terrible injustice, and he's overcome such tremendous hardship and such terrific odds in his life to make it to the pinnacle of his dreams, all to have it ripped away years after he's left the school by allegations that he was found not responsible for previously.
Keith, do you think that race plays any role in this?
I'll say to a certain extent, yes. Because when you look at it, I'm black and she's white, and I just feel like, it shouldn't have never happened. Like it shouldn't have, like the way Michigan State did me, it shouldn't have never happened. And I feel like I don't know, it hurt me when it just hurts. It hurts.
Oh, I can imagine. Your life was derailed, and Andrew, what about the woman in this case? What is she claiming now? She has not stepped forward. She has not talked about it, right?
That's correct. And she's claiming some sort of trauma. But what I don't want to lose sight of is that I think that after you read this entire narrative, you understand that Michigan State, after years of ignoring tremendous problems.
This is the school that Larry Nassar worked at, we should point out. They're in the middle of that mess.
With Larry Nassar. In the midst of that, turns around and we believe makes Keith Mumphrey the poster child for how hard they're going to now go after this issue.
That would be unfortunate if that's the case. It's incredible. Thank you, and please keep us posted, Keith. We wish you luck because we know you're trying to get your life back on track, and that you would love to play for the NFL. You say that you want to be a role model for the kids in your town. You grew up in a very, very rural, small town in Georgia, and everybody there looks up to you. And we would love to follow this case, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you for speaking with us, Keith, and Andrew. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you both. So coming up next, after Roseanne apologizes. Now she says it was the Ambien talking. And Kim Kardashian takes a meeting at the White House. President Trump looks happy. In the picture, he was tweeting, quote, "Great meeting with Kim Kardashian today. Talked about prison reform and sentencing. This is a deadly serious topic for Governor Mike Huckabee." And he says he's with Kim on this. He's up next. So the Roseanne saga and the NFL kneeling debacle have sparked a lot of debate in this country. ABC dumped Roseanne over the racist tweet, and the NFL put an end to kneeling during the anthem after public outcry. But is all of this potentially a slippery slope? Joining me now, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. He's also a Fox News contributor. Governor, good to see you tonight. Editorial piece out today suggested that, sort of liberals killed Roseanne and conservatives ruined football with all of this debate. What do you say?
I think it's bad manners that's hurting both. Racism is inappropriate. It's inexcusable. There's no place for it in a culture where people are supposed to behave with respect toward others. And there also ought to be respect for the flag. So, it's easy to say, well, it's ABC's fault or it's Ambien's fault. No, it's the people who do things that really are uncivil and that show disrespect for the other people in a civilized society. And the fact that there are consequences for that, Martha, I think in the long run, that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because Roseanne yesterday gave what sort of sounded like a pretty sincere apology via Twitter. Then today, she blamed everybody, her colleagues who threw her under the bus. Then she says Ambien, she said she was in an Ambien-fueled Twitter, I don't know what, in the middle of the night. So the company that makes Ambien tweeted this: while all pharmaceutical treatments have side effects, racism is not a known side effect of any Sanofi medication. It would maybe have behooved her, Governor, to use something that she doesn't use often, which is to just be quiet for a little while. Be silent, perhaps, for a moment.
It's called judgment, and it's ultimately her fingers that type the tweet. And so she can say it was the medication, but she's responsible. We all have to accept responsibility for what we do. And sometimes we do dumb things, and we have consequences for those. And, you know, the first thing she said I thought was the right thing when she just said it was inexcusable. And she said to her fans, don't try to defend me.
Exactly.
That was when I think
she was on the right track.
Right.
I know you want to give us a thought on this. Kim Kardashian is defending a woman named Alice Marie Johnson, who is in prison. She's a great-grandmother in prison for being involved with a drug group as an intermediary. What do you think about that?
Well, count me as somebody who doesn't keep up with the Kardashians, but I'm glad that Kim Kardashian is using her celebrity for something that's very important. We need to be really changing the policies about how we deal with the criminal justice system. As my prison director in Arkansas used to say, and it's a brilliant understanding, we're locking a lot of people up that we're mad at rather than the ones we're afraid of. And the result is we have incarcerated an extraordinary number of people who have no business being in prison. These are nonviolent offenders. We're mad at them. They've done things that made us mad, but we're really not afraid of them. And the fact is, it's costing us more money to put a person in prison for 1 year than it would to put them in college for a year, pay full tuition, room and board, buy books, and give them spending money. It's unsustainable. And Martha, when you put people in a lockup situation and then you do something that is really stupid, which we did back in the 90s, called 3 strikes and you're out, and you go through this no parole approach, what you've done then is you take the one thing that can change people's lives away from them, hope. You take hope away, you've destroyed the future of that individual and the criminal justice system.
I know you got some heat for that stance during the campaign back when you ran, but you stand by your word and you feel strongly about it. And we're glad you brought your opinion here tonight to talk to us. Thank you, Governor. Always a pleasure to see you, sir.
Thank you, Martha.
Quote of the night, up next. Journalist says he faked his own death. Kim Kardashian is at a White House meeting with the president's senior advisor. Donald Trump is obsessing again about crowd size. The maker of a drug has to deny that racism is a side effect. And it's only 10:40 a.m. It's a typical day these days, right? We're going to be back here tomorrow night at 7 with lots more news for you on the story. Now it's to D.C. as Tucker Carlson takes over. Have a good night.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. You may have heard that ABC canceled its most popular scripted show yesterday after a lead actor sent out a series of bizarre tweets, which she later blamed on sleeping pills. You've read about it. But there's at least one upside to the Roseanne story. The left is now on the record opposing racism. Attacking people on the basis of their race is immoral, they're telling us, and of course they're absolutely right about that. Let's hope this conversation continues and progresses. Liberals may finally concede that discrimination based on skin color really is wrong, whether it's in hiring or promotions or government contracting or school admissions. If they admit that, that would be real progress. It's not happening yet, though. For now, American liberals are still living in that strange, irony-free world where it's possible to denounce racism even as you commit it. That's the same world Al Gore occupies when he flies private jets to global warming conferences. It's the place where attorneys general can yell at you about domestic violence even as they beat up their girlfriends. It's hypocrisy land. It's where liberals live. Last night, for example, MSNBC held a town hall meeting dedicated to fighting racism. Guess who they invited to lecture America on the topic? You guessed it, racists. The special was literally co-hosted by Al Sharpton. Remember him? He's the guy who ridiculed Jews in New York as, quote, diamond dealers. He's the one who denounced a Jewish store owner as a white interloper. That instigated a racial massacre in which 8 people were murdered. Also on stage last night was a guy called Tim Wise. Wise describes himself as a professional anti-racism activist, which ought to be a tip-off that he himself is a racist, which obviously he is. Here's Wise using MSNBC's platform to make ugly generalizations based on skin color. Watch this.
White America has been raised to believe, A, the police are always the good guys, and frankly, that black lives matter less than white comfort. What you are saying is my discomfort with you right now is worth more than the potential that your life could be snuffed in 10 minutes.
Wait, isn't that slander against an entire racial category? Oh, yes, it is. But let's say you want an even more nasty racial stereotyping. MSNBC is the channel for you. They've got it. Here's Tim Wise again. Keep in mind, this is what liberals are now claiming is the opposite of racism.
The gentrifiers of today, their parents or their grandparents ran away from the city to get away from black and brown folk. And now their children and their grandchildren are saying, oh, the suburbs, there's only so many Olive Gardens I can go to, so I need to go back to the city and get my life in the city. But when I do that, I need to have my hot yoga studio and my pottery studio and my stuff represented. And if you intrude on that, I will then call the police.
Are you taking notes on this? Are you getting this? They're telling you on MSNBC that because certain people have the same skin color, they all have the same dumb attitudes. They like the same crappy restaurants. They spend their free time pursuing the same frivolous hobbies. And by the way, they are all, every one of them, immoral. You can tell by the way they look. That's the official position of the American left, the same people currently accusing you of racism. Christopher Harris is executive director of Unhyphenated America, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Harris, what do you make of that, watching that?
Tucker, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that came to my mind. For example, what's happening in Venezuela. When Tim was talking about people trying to gentrify areas. Well, if you look in Venezuela right now, there are people fleeing a terrible geopolitical socioeconomic issue, and they're going to Trinidad.
Right.
So they have an influx in Trinidad of Venezuelans. And Trinidad is trying to implement rules to kind of push some of them out. Now, most people don't know there's a lot of black people in Venezuela. They don't all look like Hugo Chavez. In fact, South America got one of the largest percentages. Over 50% of the slaves who were taken from Africa were brought to South America,
yes,
places like Brazil and Venezuela and everything like that. And so here it is. You have people who are black who don't want other people who are black flooding into their country.
So maybe it's more an economic issue. And I think, by the way, there are fair questions to raise about radical demographic change, for sure. It upsets people, and I understand that. But to pretend that it's all about race and that one race is worse than another race, isn't that the definition of racism?
Absolutely. Tim Wise is going to be able to pay his rent this month because he's a racial pimp. That's what he is. I mean, that's what he does. He travels around the country, going to colleges, telling young white men and young white women that you are a racist and that you're a benefit of white privilege, and they go on and they tell their parents how terrible they are because a guy named Tim Wise came to my college and told me that I have white privilege. And essentially what Tim is doing is he's assuming a privilege that, quite frankly, I don't acknowledge that he has. You know, I have zero sense of inferiority. And that's one of those things that someone like Tim wants me to believe. In fact,
when you think he wants you to have a sense of inferiority.
Absolutely. And President Bush talked about it. He said it's the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yes.
And that's what's happening around the world. It's what's happening in America, that they're constantly trying to tell young black men and young black women that you have no chance in America because of your pigmentation. But no one wants to talk about the fact that different demographics, all black people are not African Americans. My wife is actually, her parents are from Panama. Her parents came here legally with nothing. They were able to climb the socioeconomic ladder. Both of them attained their degrees. Both their daughters attained their degrees. But yet there are people who are, you know, I guess someone would call me an African American. I don't answer to that term. I'm an American black person. Obviously, you can tell by my pigmentation I'm black. But there's lots of people, even in my extended family, who have not attained what some of my in-laws have attained, regardless of the color of their skin. But Tim Wise would have you to believe that simply because of the color of your skin, you can't be successful in America. And you know what? President Trump, God bless him, what he's doing with the economy right now, it's helping black people.
Where do you think a country winds up where the official position is that the races are different, some are more moral than others, and basically they should hate each other? I mean, that is the message that a lot of our elites are foisting on the rest of us. What does that do to the country?
It tears it apart. Quite frankly, they're agents of chaos is what they are, is that they make their money, like Mr. Wise, by helping to tear people apart. With Unhyphenated America, when people ask me what is Unhyphenated America, I said, we are what we sound like. We're an organization that believes that America's best when it's unhyphenated, that if you believe in, if you embrace, if you promote the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then you're an American. And if there's no need for any prefix or suffix, you're just an American. And that's what needs to be preached and taught on our college campuses instead of having the Tim Wises and the Al Sharptons.
Liberals, when I was a kid, I'm 49, not that old. Liberals used to say what you're saying. They don't anymore. Thank you. That was really nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Tucker.
I appreciate it. Well, the media were in, of course, consensus agreement on who was responsible for Roseanne Barr's career-ending tweets. Watch.
We have a president who was elected after trafficking in barely cloaked racial animus, and so we're seeing a lot of other people who are in many ways mimicking this type of language.
This kind of stuff is a direct byproduct of how Donald Trump behaves, the things that he has said, the things that he does not condemn.
And we have to stop pretending that this president has nothing to do with it, that he's not emboldening racist and racism and giving them a platform and making it okay.
Richard Goodstein is the lawyer who advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns. He joins us tonight. Richard, I don't begrudge any political party or its surrogates in the media, the opportunity to grab an advantage when you see one. But on the subject of the tweets, which no normal person would defend, they're awful. Why the impulse to immediately make it a partisan political issue when there's a human message in this conversation, which is don't attack people on the basis of their race? Right. Like, it's that simple. Why the impulse to make it partisan?
Well, certainly what Roseanne Barr did was pathetic, not just to say it, but then to blame it on ambient. And remember, she also said it was Memorial Day. I mean, it was, and this is somebody who had said the exact same thing about Susan Rice, who had basically defended the whole Seth Rist. I mean,
whatever.
She's gone down one rabbit hole.
You don't need to convince me the tweet was bad. I'm there already.
Well, no, actually, there are people I suspect who actually are, kind of joining to her defense, right? Oh, this is somehow her First Amendment rights are being infringed.
I think but I'm not making that. What I'm saying is, look, for most of my adult life, the senior Democrat in the United States Senate was a former Klan recruiter, okay? Robert Byrd. A lot of things named after Robert Byrd. I'm not even attacking Robert Byrd. He apologized. But, let's get a little proportion here. The outrage is selective. I'm not defending the Roseanne crap, but I also think when people are jumping up and down and being like, actually, Trump did this, it's purely political. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, so actually I think that people who don't subscribe to your view believe the following: that Donald Trump has given license to people by saying they're good Nazis, by mocking handicapped people, by basically, the list is
mocking
endless.
Handicapped
oh, sure. Remember he went like this about that New York Times reporter?
Was he mocking all handicapped people?
He was mocking that guy. That's pathetic. That may be the single most pathetic thing that he's done. And he talked about Mexicans being racist. Look, the list is on and on. The fact of the matter is, though, when Donald Trump does that, and people say, well, he won, so his staff can go, well, I can mimic people. I can make fun of John McCain who's dying. I can, that's the problem. Then so people who are supporters think at his rallies, you've heard people who covered his rally said these people were lovely, and then the rally would start and they would say the most anti-Semitic, anti-female.
So look, I've been on television for 20 years through Democrat and Republican administrations, and the volume and the nastiness, the hate mail I received remains pretty much constant. I didn't blame Obama for the attacks or the death threats I got 5 years. I mean, let's just be totally real here. It's not, look, I understand you don't like Trump, but this is a much larger question. And part of the question is, do people who are engaging in racism, like Al Sharpton, have the right to lecture the rest of us about racism? Do they? Is Al Sharpton the spokesman you want against racism?
No.
Really?
He's not.
Oh, okay.
I agree with you. But I do think that it is undeniable that the fact that Donald Trump spews what he did on the campaign trail and as president to talk about good Nazis is something that sends a signal like, I basically am drawing succor from these people. And it's why he tweets about every stupid thing under the sun. NFL players kneeling, and he can't bring himself to be critical.
What you're trying to do is draw me into defending every dumb Trump tweet, which I have no interest in doing. I want to talk about the universal principles here, okay? So we're against racism, I hope. I certainly am. We do a lot of shows on it.
Of course.
Is it wrong to discriminate against people on the basis of their skin color?
Well, so that's a different. You're talking about affirmative action.
I'm actually talking about racism. Is it wrong to discriminate against people on the basis of their skin color? And if it's not, then why do we care what Roseanne said? But if it is, I understand why we're upset.
Right.
Because you shouldn't attack people on the basis of immutable characteristics. Right. Do you agree with that?
I think that Roseanne Barr and people like her who talk about black people as apes are wrong.
I agree with that completely. I think it's disgusting. But what's the principle? Is it wrong to discriminate against someone on the basis of his skin color, to hold him back, to penalize him on the basis of his skin. It's a really simple question. Can you answer it?
Of course, but
no,
and again, you're acting like somehow slavery didn't happen.
I'm not saying that.
Well,
I'm asking
that's the intimation of what you're getting at.
I
understand.
Why would it? Please.
Because that's what you're getting at.
No, I'm not getting at that. I'm a very straightforward person. I say what I mean. And please don't attack me. I'm asking you about a principle.
Right.
Which is it wrong to hurt people, to hold them back, deny them things they would otherwise get because of their race? It's a really simple question, yes or no.
I agree that people should not be discriminated against.
Please answer the question.
I'm saying they should not be discriminated against their race, but we don't have a colorblind society. Eric Holder and other black cabinet officials have trouble hailing a taxi cab to go to certain areas of Northwest Washington.
By the way, I'm not denying that. I'm merely saying, is it wrong to practice racism against people? Oh, it is?
Yes.
So you would say it's totally wrong to say to a child, because of your skin color, we're holding you back. There's a massive lawsuit against Harvard right now by Asian students who have basically proven that Harvard didn't let them in because of their race.
Right.
Is that okay with you?
Jews used to be subjected to the exact same thing.
And it was wrong.
Right.
But liberals support it now.
Right.
So those people lecture me about racism. Are you joking?
The Harvard argument is that there's a certain virtue in diversity.
Oh, there's a virtue in discrimination. Because
in diversity.
The argument
You call what you want.
No, I'm not. I'm calling it what it is.
Yeah.
Because we both agreed that penalizing people on the basis of their race is immoral. You agreed with that. And yet it's happening right now with the full support of liberals, the same ones who are lecturing the rest of us about racism.
Right.
It's too much. Do you understand?
And I'm saying there's a quilt involved, and yes, discriminating against people on the basis of their skin color is wrong.
Let's stop it.
Basically,
How about that?
But people were held back for hundreds of years,
agree.
and to basically act like that didn't happen is wrong too.
But I'm not acting like it didn't happen.
I'm not saying you
I think it's the central sin of America.
Yeah.
I think it's our original sin. I think it's terrible. But I don't think that racism is okay, and liberals do.
Right.
And I just want to be clear, and I want our viewers to understand that is the official position of the Democratic Party, is that hurting people on the basis of their race is A-okay.
No. The official
Yes,
position of the Democratic Party is that we have to take cognizance of the fact that what happened for 200 years, and if we act like it didn't happen, and that somehow or other we reach a point in life that we just act like skin color doesn't matter, that is basically ignoring the obvious.
So the Chinese kid who arrived here 20 minutes ago suffers for that because of his race.
No question.
And that's okay with the Democrats. The same ones giving us lectures during their anti-racism summits.
Yeah. As I said, I think what the Chinese students are arguing about at Harvard has merit, as it did for the Jews.
But it's not a big deal because they're Chinese.
No, not in the least. I'm with them. Yeah.
I hope so. I am. Thank you, Richard. Good to see you.
Sure.
We just found an amazing series of old blog posts that, as far as we can tell, have received basically no media attention. The person who wrote them looks in retrospect like a prophet calling for America First policies at least a decade before Donald Trump entered politics. In the days after Hurricane Katrina, for example, the blogger in question suggested that native-born Americans, not, quote, low-paid Mexican workers, ought to rebuild the city of New Orleans. In 2006, the blogger said this about her television viewing habits, quote, I love Lou Dobbs. His show has become required viewing around my house. The blogger largely agreed with Lou Dobbs on immigration. Quote, flying the Mexican flag on U.S. soil strikes me as incredibly presumptuous and insulting to the U.S. The blogger went on to argue that illegal immigrants to this country are not coming here because they embrace our ideals. They're coming for money, which they then send back to Mexico. And she made a pretty clear-headed, evidence-based case for that. In a 2005 post, the same blogger attacked Democrat Howard Dean for using racist, anti-white rhetoric in a speech. Quote, tagging the other side, the Republicans, as the party of whitey may sound just like the way to get these minority voters back, but it so misses the point. The blogger later scolded Howard Dean for insulting Christians and white Americans. Who wrote all that? We could give you time to guess, but you'd never guess. Believe it or not, it seems like the author of what I just read was Joy Reid, the now totally dogmatic, race-baiting MSNBC weekend host. According to the Internet Archive, Joy Reid apparently posted those views on her now-defunct blog more than a decade ago. She wouldn't do that now. MSNBC would fire her right away for the crime of independent thinking. We repeatedly contacted Joy Reid's lawyer and MSNBC Today for comment, and no one responded to us. It's possible that Reid will claim those posts were written by a mysterious hacker. She's claimed that before, the last time she got caught with embarrassing blog posts. Maybe she'll blame the entire thing on Vladimir Putin himself or some nameless Macedonian agent. Or maybe she'll do the unexpected and admit that there was a time, before the revolution currently in progress, when she was actually kind of smart and reasonable. We await her explanation. Billionaire George Soros says Europe's path to survival is open borders and higher debt level. Nigel Farage weighs in on that idea next. Well, progressivism, not just in this country but around the world, is increasingly coming to resemble not just a religion, but a cult bent on suicide. Not overstating that. In Europe, billionaire George Soros recently said that European countries ought to cope with migrant crises, the ones that he helped encourage, by keeping their borders open to new arrivals and then taking on tens of billions of dollars in new debt, as if they don't have enough, to fund aid to developing countries. Meanwhile, in Oakland, California, the First Congregational Church is urging its members not to call the police ever, no matter what the problem is, for the stated purpose of protecting non-whites in the congregation from police violence. Nigel Farage once led the UK Independence Party, and he joins us now. Nigel, thanks for coming on. I wanted to ask you about this because you have an international perspective, and I don't think these trends are just American. I mean, I think these impulses are sort of shared by a lot of the people in charge of the world, the West.
Yeah.
And one of the driving impulses seems to be masochism or the desire to destroy our civilization, even suicidal in some cases. But the idea that you're not allowed to defend yourself seems to undergird a lot of what we're seeing. Have you noticed this?
Yes, not just yourself, but in fact the whole shape of society. I mean, George Soros' Open Society Foundation, which he, of course, has poured billions of dollars into. I mean, this is the biggest political campaigning organisation in the world. He wants to break down the fundamental values of our society. And in the case of Europe, he doesn't want Europe to be based on Christianity. Now, all of this, whether it's Soros or some of those very strange people in California, all of this is based on some kind of self-loathing, some sort of guilt trip about the past. And in Soros's case, it's a guilt trip, of course, about America's, Germany's wartime actions, the way the Jews were treated. In America, in many cases, it's how the native Indians were treated. It's all based on guilt, but it's not based on reality. I have to say, in the case of Soros, the bosses in Brussels will be furious with his timing. Right now, we have Italy in revolt because the new government, or the attempted new government, wants to get rid of 500,000 illegal migrants, and Soros appears to be going ever so slightly mad.
Right. I mean, look, I would say that there are a lot of sins that we collectively have committed as a society, as a civilization, obviously. But I sort of wonder, can we continue if those sins so shake our faith in ourselves that we refuse to defend ourselves? I mean, the church in Oakland that we described in the intro is encouraging its members not to call police even when they feel they need the police. I mean, if that's not a suicidal impulse, what is it?
Oh, no, I mean, look, there are many European cities now where the total failure of our political class to defend our Judeo-Christian culture, which actually underpins our whole society, is in many ways what's opened the doors to Islamic extremism. So we are engaged in some very, very dangerous policies here. The good news, though, is that voters are rebelling. Brexit, Trump, the recent Italian elections, the victory of Viktor Orban in Hungary, whatever these people say, ordinary people, real people, those that pay their taxes, obey the law, and go to work, they want none of this.
I wonder why the Eastern Europeans don't seem quite as guilty as the West. Is it because they suffered for so long under the Soviets?
Oh, look, they suffered in many cases under Nazism and, of course, under the Soviets. It's not until 1990, Tucker, that these countries were actually free Western democracies. And they do. I think it's important to realise that the church plays a much bigger role in society in Poland and Hungary than it does in France and Germany.
That's really smart. Nigel Farage, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Alan Dershowitz, one of the smartest and most distinguished men on the left, but he's being exiled for refusing to abandon civil liberties for political expedience. He tells his story next. Harvard professor of law Alan Dershowitz is one of the most distinguished and certainly one of the most famous liberals in this country. Increasingly, though, he doesn't seem to have much of a home left on the left because he refuses to participate in dogmatic attacks on the president. Dershowitz has sharply criticized the Mueller investigation, for instance. He says that anti-Trump hostility is justifying attacks on civil liberties that threaten all of us. for saying that, he says his liberal friends don't invite him to dinner parties anymore, and some bark at him. Professor Dershowitz joins us tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on. I was struck by this story, your account of this, because you've taken unpopular, really unpopular positions, some that I disagree with over the years, and you haven't had this problem.
No.
Why? What's the difference?
Well, it's Trump. Trump changes everything. Just yesterday, on Martha's Vineyard, there was a dinner party to which I was not, my wife and I were not invited, but apparently I was the subject of the entire conversation. People asking, what's happened to Dershowitz? Why is he turned to the right? And I wish I had been there, because I would have pointed my finger at my liberal friends and said, it's all your fault. If you had worked as hard for the election of Hillary Clinton as I did, and if she had been elected and they were trying to impeach or charge her, I'd be saying exactly the same things in defense of her rights, as I did in defense of the rights of Bill Clinton and also in the defense of the rights of Richard Nixon going back to the 1970s.
Well, I
haven't
that.
changed. I have not changed. They have.
So just as a reference point, you were involved in the defense for a little while anyway of O.J. Simpson, who I think is credibly accused of murdering 2 people with a knife. When you went to Martha's Vineyard during those years, 95, 96, did people attack you at dinner parties for that?
A little bit, but not as much as this. It's never been like this. And this time, it includes some of my relatives. As I said, the only thing that hurts me is that up until now, people who are my relatives would tell me, oh, people come over to you and say, you're related to Alan Dershowitz. Wow. Now they say, you're related to Alan Dershowitz? How can you justify what he's been saying about Donald Trump? So it affects my relatives, and that hurts me. I have a thick skin. I've been doing this for years. I've developed the thickest skin imaginable. By the way, a lot of the tweets, then I get hundreds of tweets and messages, a lot of them not only focus on what I've been saying about the constitutional rights of Donald Trump, but they relate it to me being pro-Israel and Jewish and make an anti-Semitic thing out of it as well. And so, there's not only too much anti-Semitism on the right, there's quite a bit of it on the anti-Trump left as well. I'm feeling it.
I've noticed that. So, I mean, you've been at this for, I don't know, wouldn't even want to guess, half a century, an awfully long time, at the kind of forefront of the civil libertarian left. Has that group shrunk? I mean, is it not just Trump, but maybe the left is less interested in traditional civil liberties than it used to be?
Shrunk. There are no civil libertarians left on the left, certainly not the American Civil Liberties Union. They were the ones who said that the raid on Cohen's office, taking his lawyer-client files, was a good thing, not even suggesting what I suggested and what was ultimately adopted by the judge, to have a judicial monitor going through all of these emails. The ACLU is dead in the water when it comes to defending the civil liberties of people who they don't agree with, and that's just awful. There are still some civil libertarians left, but you can count them on one hand. Everybody has to pass the shoe on the other foot test. If the shoe were on the other foot, would you be taking the same position you're taking today? I passed that test. There are some others who passed that test, but too many, both on the right and on the left, don't pass the test. If Hillary Clinton had been elected, a lot of the people who are supporting me and defending me on the right would be attacking me for criticizing the prosecution or the impeachment of Hillary Clinton. We need neutral principles. We need standards of constitutionality that are apolitical, and I refuse to allow partisan politics to preempt my views on the Constitution, which have stayed the same for 50 years.
Amen. When the FBI broke into the Gmail account of that creepy Governor Elliot Spitzer, I defended that creepy Governor Elliot Spitzer.
He's my friend.
I know, but I don't like him.
He was my research assistant. I like Elliot.
But it was totally wrong what they did to him, and it's important to say so. Professor, thank you. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Well, American companies tend to be progressive and defiant in the United States, but when it comes to dealing with China's autocrats, they are meek and submissive, amazingly so. Latest installment of our series on China is after the break.